Welcome everyone. Just want to let you know you're in the right place with Operation Parent and Dr. Erin Terada. We are super excited to have you here with us today. We are loading up everybody in the system, and so while we do that, I just want to take a minute and tell you about our next webinar. So what we'd like for you to do there is just keep an eye on our website for the New Year webinars. We are planning to tackle opioids and fentanyl, as well as some community prevention information. So we've got all those things in the works, and they will start to be promoted on our social media handles as well as up on our webpage very soon. So if you wouldn't mind to join us on our vibrant social media community if you haven't already, as well as keep an eye on the website for the registration links. If I could just take you through a couple of the technical components of our system so that you can participate today. There is an orange arrow at the top of the screen. If you want to just tap on that orange arrow and open that tab all the way up, you'll be able to follow me here with what I'm going to introduce to you. We're mostly going to be using the question feature today. So that's about halfway down the control panel. You can go there and input any comment, question, anything you want to communicate to Amanda and I today as we work on the back end of the webinar. Those questions and comments are going to come to us privately. So just know that, especially when we get to your favorite part at the very end, the Q&A with Dr. Erin Terada. We'll receive those questions privately and keep them private as we share them. We will keep the sender private as we share those with Dr. Terada. So just know that your favorite part, as many questions as we can are going to get answered at the end of the presentation. We're going to have extra content for you today, so we understand if you're not able to stay through the full webinar, just know that you're going to get the recording within 24 hours and you can finish that up when you have time. We're delighted that you've made time for us in the middle of the day, and we can't wait to spend this time together and continue to learn. We've got 4 amazing handouts put together for you. Dr. Terada gave you a great resource of education and treatment, a full list of education and treatment resources that we're going to talk about during the webinar today. We have observable behaviors and signs with eating disorders. We've given you a full PDF of all the slides, as well as a really important one, how to support loved ones during the holidays if they're struggling with body image or eating disorder types of things. So you've received those handouts in an email yesterday or this morning, the email that you registered with. They are also available here. You can download them here while we're live, right below the question section. We are recording this presentation, and it will be sent within 24 hours after completing the webinar. You will also receive a certificate of attendance, and that's going to be attached in that same follow-up email. The email, which contains the recording link and the certificate of attendance, will be sent together. And thank you for giving us a little bit of time to pull that together for you after the webinar. We will send you a short survey immediately as we close the webinar. If our audience, each of you have been so gracious to continue to give us feedback along the way, and you are really helping to shape and develop this webinar program as we go. So please continue to do that survey. We love you for it. We really value what the suggestions that you offer there, as well as the feedback that you give us each time. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Terada. She is coming back for a second time with us. If you want to check out the webinar that she did with us before, it's up on the website, and it's focused on anxiety. It's embracing uncertainty is in the front end of the title. So we'd love it if you'd go back and watch that one as well after this webinar today. She has received her doctorate in clinical psychology from the Illinois School of Professional Psychology. She's worked in outpatient, individual therapy, residential, inpatient levels, all levels of care. Um, she's going to tell you more about her credentials, but she is very dedicated to teaching and educating the community at large, which is how we've been lucky to have her back for 2 webinars. I'm not sure when she has time to do it, but she does relax and restore. She adores spending time with her husband and their fur children, which includes her dog Ruby, and she spells it in the cutest way, Roobee. And she's also an avid gardener. And so I stole a little bit of your thunder there, but I'm so thankful to have you back, and we can't wait to learn from you today.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, so to give you just a little sort of context of kind of my stuff that I was very much, oh, we're kind of having a little difficulty here, but that's okay. That I was very much, pleased to kind of introduce myself with some of these things that Michelle was so grateful to put out there. Yes, I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm also a certified eating disorder specialist and approved supervisor for others who are seeking that designation. I also have a Psych Pact approved license, which means I am telehealth certified and accredited to provide therapy and support in more than one location, pretty much in 33 states across the US and some other country related areas such as Guam and other places. And that is something that I am really proud of to be able to do as part of what I do, in providing supervision, health care, therapy, as well as a community resource. Now I can be a national resource. I do treat specifically people who have anxiety issues, eating disorders, PTSD, and OCD. Those are my areas of concentration. And like Michelle did say, I do have 4 lovely fur children, which are Ruby, short for root beer, Elvis, and Bubble and Squeak. And one of them, or maybe a couple of them, might make a special guest appearance in this, so look out. I am also a very highly dedicated gardener, even though it is the winter. I do have an indoor garden that is really doing well right now, but I can't wait to get back to next year to see what else I can grow and sort of create on my own, my garden. I really love doing it. So today, I also want to talk about a little more about Relief Mental Health and what we offer. I am currently their clinical training director, and this is a little bit more about what we do at Relief Mental Health. We opened in 2020 in Oak Brook, Illinois, but we now have currently 10 locations from Illinois, Wisconsin, and New Jersey. We offer deep TMS, which is deep transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is a non-invasive, non-medication based treatment for depression, anxiety, and there's a protocol for OCD. We also offer Spravato, which is a nasal ketamine treatment. We are going to be offering IV ketamine in certain locations. Medication management and psychotherapy is a part of our services that are growing and flourishing, and we offer individual and family for all ages. We are a CBD-based practice, which means that we offer CBT, ERP, ACT, CPT, and DBT for depression, OCD, and anxiety disorder, along with all other co-occurring issues that come with it. We offer also in-person and telehealth therapy, as well as medication management service in both modes too, in-person and telehealth. So we do have a lot to offer across a wide variety of locations and services, where some of the places are not usually places where people have a large contact to the community. So that's always great to be able to say too. So today, what I'm going to do is hopefully be able to give you a good overview of what it is like to, kind of support somebody with issues with food or their body. And the best way to kind of break this down is there's going to be a lot of information. Some of it's going to be covered in handouts. You can always reference back to this, and hopefully be able to give you a good overview about the criteria for most common eating disorders that we see and how they develop, understanding the warning signs of these eating disorders, as well as negative body image is going to be a key thing, as well as when to kind of seek out professional treatment. The last thing that I'm always usually excited about is, the tips and how we can support and improve in the home and doing stuff even starting today, which I'll go over later on how to better help people connect with food and their body image. So let's get at it. What I usually like to discuss first is like what we know now, and the prevalency as well as the immediate kind of effects of what this is about in terms of like when somebody does have a struggle with food or their body and how that develops. People just don't one day wake up and say that they have, issues with their body image or food. There is a very kind of longer seated process that goes about before that emerges. And what we know is by age 6, girls especially start to express concern about their weight or shape. One third of boys and the majority of girls between the ages of 6 and 8 express a desire to want to be thinner. And 78% of 10-year-olds eventually will start to have tried dieting once or have a need to want to lose weight. Again, this isn't natural. It's not like as a baby we kind of, get born and we have that thought, oh, I think I need to be thinner. This really is a learned behavior because of a couple of different impactful sort of things that are going on, which we'll go over, that start to produce this type of thinking. And in fact, we also know that over one half of teenage girls, by the time that they're kind of in, and one third of teenage boys in their adolescent and teenage years, will use unhealthy weight control behaviors such as skipping meals, restricting their intake, fasting, smoking cigarettes, engage in vomiting and taking laxatives, as well as something, akin to supplements or diet pills to try to lose weight. So this becomes, again, over time, something that can put somebody in a place where it is very, very much a at-risk behavior, just like anything else that you guys have learned about for at-risk behaviors. This can also have really devastating consequences, not only to mental, emotional, but physical health as well. And what I'm talking about is that the results of engaging in eating-based behaviors or compensatory behaviors, as we'll find out, can have long-term physical health side effects. And there are times where some of these side effects, based on what people are doing with their eating or with their bodies, cannot be reversed most of the time. So we need to kind of consider there are some things that will be permanent that come out of this and will impact a person's life. They are often really secretive about if they're engaging in these, and other co-occurring issues such as depression, anxiety, and substance abuse may be more salient or noticeable than the eating disorder, because often people, when I talk to them about why they're engaging in this, most people know that this is something that wouldn't be approved of, that it's not something really healthy for them, yet they engage in it for a purpose other than kind of those things. So, a lot of times they are secretive for a reason, because there's a lot of shame and guilt behind, the wanting to change your body, and sort of praising your self-worth by your looks, which we'll go into, but they're often secretive for a reason. So it's not that you're not picking up on certain things. People will do as much as they can to keep it secret because they know that it's really something that wouldn't be pursued as like something healthy for them or seen in a way that is a good thing. However, because of their secretive nature and the extent that they do have, these can be deadly. And I know you kind of see that one statistic at the bottom. If anything, I want to not necessarily use this as a scare tactic. I want to kind of get the brevity of the situation kind of out of the way and look at the seriousness that 1 out of 5 before the age of 25 will die from medical complications related to engaging in these behaviors if they have a diagnosable and treated eating disorder or seeking recovery in an eating disorder. So once it gets to the place where it is an actual eating disorder, 1 out of 5 before the age of 25, if they continue to engage, will have the really high risk and or die from this, because this does kill more people than any other disorder known in the DSM. It is really taxing on the person as well as family as well as everybody. So this is serious when we talk about this. So hopefully, again, it's not to scare you, but to just give you like, this is serious. That's probably the one statistic I have that this is serious, that really gets through. So when we are talking about this particular sort of topic, I do want to delineate between, if we had to look at the general population, the people that I am particularly talking about and to, and that we're looking at is really the middle and the most right column. So the disordered eating or unhealthy relationship with food, which is kind of how people sort of get to a place of like either diet culture or using different things to kind of change their body or their relationship with food. That is not necessarily a diagnosable eating disorder, but they can be dabbling in behaviors that can be considered part of that. As we're also talking to, again, those people who do end up developing a diagnosable eating disorder, because of the intensity or severity or how many behaviors they're using and meeting the criteria. I'm not talking to, again, normal body dissatisfaction or normal discomfort, which would be everybody probably has one thing or a couple of things occasionally that they don't like or they don't feel totally comfortable in their body. And there is a place where you can limit or stop doing those behaviors because there is some semblance of, at some point, feeling that you are comfortable in your body in some degree. I'm talking about the people who don't have some, kind of idea of that or have engaged in or are about to and trying to prevent those people from engaging in more disordered eating or unhealthy relationships with food that can lead to eating disorders today. So I just want to always make that distinction. This is not necessarily everybody's body dissatisfaction because there will be that. It's just when it gets to a place where it's unhealthy and really needs to be intervened on. So let's go over kind of the top three. And I would say these are not limited to, but these are usually the ones that are spoken about the most in relation to body image. Anorexia. What we do is kind of look at three main kind of criteria for anorexia, which is really restriction of intake for energy that really ends up creating a significantly low body weight. And this is in context of age, sex or gender, and developmental trajectory. So really looking at, that can be different for a kid or an adolescent versus a fully grown adult. But we take those into consideration, and a significantly low body weight is really at a certain marker of BMI or less, and that needs to be established for anorexia. In another place, there needs to be an intense fear of gaining weight or becoming fat, even though they are underweight. So this intense fear is often something that we would call an irrational fear, that they know that they are also underweight, but intense fear of regaining weight or gaining more weight, and the effects that it would take. And that this is a disturbance in the way which one's body weight or shape is experienced. So there's some distortion, and usually there's an influence of body weight or shape on self-evaluation or self-appraisal. There is a big part of this is, again, that self-appraisal or body image perspective is distorted to the point where there is not a way to kind of detect, kind of their self-worth or self-appraisal by any other means. And most things are going to be filtered through or really unduly influenced by how I look as a person is going to be my worth as a person to everybody else. And this is going to be interlaced in all of these disorders. As well as there can be at this point a denial of the seriousness of the current low body weight because that intense fear is so irrational that people will still get to that. Even you show them all the ways that this is helping or hurting them, like to help them with their labs, any physical markers of underweight or really serious side effects of what they're doing, they still would deny that this is causing them any problems. So keep those things in mind when you're looking at it. Bulimia is a little bit different. When you hear bulimia, we're talking about a disorder that people will engage in a cycle of binging episodes and compensatory behaviors. So binging episodes would be eating a large amount of food in a very discrete period of time. We usually clock that about at under 2 hours or less. And it would be a large amount of food that is not necessarily what the average person would eat in that same time period. There's also a lack of control during one of these episodes that is experienced by the individual. So either not being able to stop to eat or stop eating, or a lack of control in how one is consuming the food that is usually often kind of experienced by that person. Afterwards, there might be feelings of depression, guilt, shame after they're done eating or the food is gone. Whatever kind of gets them to stop. It's different for everybody, but there is also these really negative feelings that come afterwards, which thus creates a compensatory behavior, which is trying to compensate for the large amount of intake and energy input that you've put in. We need to get that out. So this could be the things such as purging behaviors, which would be self-induced vomiting, but also is categorized as overuse of exercise, abuse of medications or supplements in sort of a way to lose weight or try to change your weight, laxative abuse, diuretic abuse, and fasting. So these things kind of go in tandem. One does not occur without the other kind of being there. So there's an input and then there's an output. And both can be just as deadly together. They're really difficult and stressful and have a lot of risks with them. Binge eating, which is another one of the top three, is a recent kind of addition in this last DSM 5, which kind of goes over the binging part without the compensatory part for somebody to gauge in. So again, the binge criteria: eating a large amount of food, the lack of control that's experienced, and the depressed, guilty, shameful immediately following the episode is occurring on its own without any compensatory behavior. So no exercising, no nothing in that regard, that they're just binge eating and having those episodes at a certain rate is kind of what is involved in binge eating. There are some other criterias, in concerning sort of the rate and sort of how they experience those binge eating episodes and other things that are rule outs or need to be met. But these are the three large criteria that are usually pretty common in binge eating that we use for diagnosis. When we look at any of these disorders, we're looking at to be able to qualify, and this is kind of the key thing between disordered eating, an unhealthy relationship with food versus a diagnosable eating disorder. We need to look at these three areas, which is the duration, the frequency of those behaviors, and the severity. So generally for most of these disorders to actually be diagnosable for a specific criteria set, so anorexia, bulimia, or binge eating, we need to see that that has been there for at least 3-month time period. If not, there's other things that we can diagnose or allude to that are showing that it's getting close to that, but we really need to look at 3-month time period as most of the marker for duration. Frequency, this is really more for binge eating and bulimia, is how often these episodes of like binging and compensatory or binging happen. Would kind of look at the frequency, also sort of that also gives an indication of the severity of how much is happening. So the more frequent these episodes happen means the more severe specificity of that person having that disorder. For severity with anorexia is based on BMI alone, is a one indicator that when it goes under a certain percentage of BMI or a certain rate of BMI, which is usually indicated at 17 BMI or less for any individual, that markers the severity for that disorder or that to be diagnosed. So really when we look at this, somebody can engage in one of these things or all of these things or a single episode or for like a couple of weeks or things like that. And really if they don't meet these particular moments or things and criteria, we're not going to diagnose it as a clinical eating disorder. We're going to look out for those things and they may have more of a disordered eating pattern than anything else. When we look at other things that we can diagnose it at or other things that we can look at, eating and feeding disorders are, encapsulating a large sort of area continuum of eating and feeding issues. The one thing that usually people do get caught up in, and I want to clarify for a bit, is the other specified eating or feeding disorder or OSFED diagnosis. This is also a legit eating disorder, and it's really when criteria is not fully met for another diagnosis. So under the frequency, hasn't been a long duration, or severity is not met. But we see the symptoms are clinically significant enough to warrant an eating disorder is possibly going to occur or is going to occur, that they're just not meeting criteria yet for another diagnosis. Other eating disorders that you might hear about a lot or that are also common to see in sort of the, again, continuum are things like avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, or what is other known as ARFID. This is the intense restriction or avoidance of food without the body image symptoms. Rumination disorder, which is a different type of disorder that people can uh, really do something with the chewing or mechanics of food once they've eaten. And pica is the eating of a non-food type substance, such as metals, plastics, or things like that. All of these, though, do not have a body image component and are, again, things that we need to kind of maintain separately from what we're discussing in this. So if these are really salient, they're not something that we would, classify as having something to do with body image, but they are still legitimate eating disorders. So in terms of somebody who is becoming disordered with their eating or starting to develop negative body image, I want to go over really briefly. One of the handouts is observable signs and risk factors for eating disorders, but I want to give you an idea of what these things could be. And part of it, we need to look at biological, psychological, and social impact risk factors, meaning there's certain things that could set somebody up to actually be be in a place where they are predispositioned to have an eating disorder, yet don't meet full criteria yet, or could put somebody at a risk, which is really things like having a genetically close relative with an eating disorder. That could mean that we have the genes for it, and we are putting ourselves at a predispositional risk. Having a close relative with a mental health condition that can be akin alongside, such as like anxiety issues, could put us at a more of a risk of developing one. Having a history of dieting, and I would say not just the individual, but also people in the house too, can also put somebody at risk. Having a history of just always feeling like you're having a negative intake or energy balance, that, you know, the things of trying to gain weight or trying to maintain a healthy cycle could be really salient before an eating disorder is developed, as well as something that we kind of look out for. And there's a name there called diabulimia. We know that people who have developed, or children who grow up with type 1 diabetes or insulin dependent from a child or juvenile diabetes, can also develop and have a higher risk of developing diabulimia, which is another risk factor, which concludes manipulation of insulin and injections of it to be able to binge or purge. And this is pretty serious too, because it requires specific treatment, unlike the other disorders, to have another component to make sure that, you know, they're health-wise going to not develop other more severe signs of their diabetes. Psychologically, we tend to look at those kids who are more rigid and perfectionistic, which comes from temperament, that they already are voicing, have a strong history of body image dissatisfaction from a childhood. If somebody has a personal history of an anxiety disorder, again, they are going to be probably more prone to having an eating disorder develop if they meet other factors because of that anxiety base in the disorder category. As well as with the perfectionism, they could also have behavioral inflexibility that does not allow them to change their behavior, wants to control things, do those things in a certain way or a certain order, and can't really break out of that cycle, can put somebody in a risk of not being able to break out of that. And when they get, you know, stuck in that way with food or their body image or other things, that can also predispose somebody to having more risk factors for an eating disorder. Socially, again, we're going to go over some of the impacts of these in a little bit more detail. But, you know, risk factors include things like previous weight stigma that they've experienced, particularly the issues of teasing and bullying, having an appearance ideal internalization, which we'll talk about in a second, acculturation issues for those in a more diverse or feeling that they're in a minority category and need to, again, acculturate to the new, more dominant culture that we have. This could be part of the issue that they experience, and development of an eating disorder is one way that they can figure out how to acculturate quicker than, you know, what they have been experiencing. And also limited social networks. If we don't feel like we have really good connections or a lot of friends, or limited in our ability to be social, that can also sort of provide a risk factor for people to develop it, because again, most of the time they want to be accepted and feel that their appearance is something that can get them acceptance. And in a large way, if we don't have that feedback from social experiences, we will end up creating something to change ourselves and do something in some ways that could lend somebody to developing an eating disorder. There are some gender differences in terms of the things that, again, are focused on in that body image ideal that I do want to briefly go over, which is females, or people who identify as females, will tend to focus more on efforts on a physical appearance based on something called the thin ideal. So trying to be as thin as possible is kind of that goal for them, that it really is more about how thin can you be than anything else. And the appearance of that thinness is the really key thing that is focused on. In males, it will be more of a focus or efforts on physical appearance based on more things like lean muscle mass gains and structural symmetry and body composition than a thin ideal. So it's not always going to be performance based, it's going to be appearance based, but it's based more on the aesthetics in a different way on how the body will look than a thin ideal, but it's going to be on structure and sort of appearance of muscle mass and lean muscle mass. In place of gender differences, so for people who identify in the LGBTQA plus, category, as well as, again, across the board. This isn't necessarily always going to be the case, but we want to also think about some of the ways that this can be sort of experienced differently. Is the LGBTQ IA plus population are particularly susceptible to engaging in disorder behaviors and other risk factor behaviors, but particularly they may be more apt to engage in this because of body dysmorphic thoughts or difficulties kind of incorporating sort of like a certain body aesthetic or challenges with that in their journey and trying to find out how they would identify as a gender or their sexuality. And it is often in two different ways that I've seen this over the past several decades treating these disorders. Is it's often when somebody does adopt disordered eating or an eating disorder, in sort of this sense that they are often pursuing a certain body image ideal that they would like to be. So if they are transitioning to another gender, if they're transgender, they're transitioning to meeting the body ideals of the gender that they are looking forward or want to become, or that they are trying to prevent their body from going towards the gender that they are trying to get away from. So trying to be as thin as possible, to avoid further hormonal changes or developmental changes so that I can maintain the body image or try to pursue that body that I do want, and stop or create something that would block any sort of development into becoming the gender that I don't want to be, is often pursued. So it's really more of like trying to avoid or fend off the things that are really bothering me, as well as sort of like trying to work towards being that gender that I do want to become, is more of the emphasis on that. And that can take either like the male ideal or the female ideal that I talked about earlier. So let's go into kind of contributing factors. And when I mean contributing factors, we're going to go into those things that impact people developing this. There's three major places of impact that I'm going to review. And I think, many of these you might kind of see and familiar or have been talked about in other seminars that you've watched based on bullying behaviors, effects of media. But I'm also going to touch on another one, which is athletic performance and physical competition, which is really a key thing in this particular discussion for body image and eating disorders that I think is often something that we don't think about as a way of being impactful in a negative way, but can be. So first of all, impacts of bullying. You guys have kind of seen and often, looked at, things through either Operation Parent or other resources that show that bullying can be a very big effect on developing young kids as well as adolescents in sort of their body image, is another place where this is a big thing that's impacting. Bullying has together been seen to be one of the bigger contributors to starting negative body image concerns, because as well as low self-esteem and depression, this is something where people are often, kind of pointed out as something that's different or bullied on, especially in their earlier years, if it's going to be an impact on weight. So 60% of those affected by eating disorders, doesn't matter what, but they will say that weight shaming and stigma was a large part, 60% of contributing that they were bullied on. So think about that in context of, we don't necessarily say, a lot of things regarding to weight stigma, but we're going to talk about that. And weight shaming can play a significant role to put somebody in a place of risk factors for developing it. And this doesn't even mean that like they immediately start, some of these behaviors right after experiencing that bullying event. There are many teenagers as well as adults beyond that can reference back to being shamed for their weight as a child or as a early teen or as a teen, has formed this opinion about their self-appraisal, their worth, their body, and needing to change something. And if you thought that this was kind of like, something that only girls experience or boys, in a certain percentage, we actually do have data to suggest that it's about the same. So 40% or about 37% for boys experience the same amount of bullying for weight-based teasing and bullying, which is significantly higher, even when I heard this statistic for the first time, than a lot of people would think, that this is, again, that same contributing factor. And you have 60% of the people in that 40 or 37 category saying like, yes, I did experience that and it can impact me down the line, even into adulthood. So let's talk about kind of examples of what I would concern or consider to be body-based bullying. Peers, obviously, that's the first place that we're going to talk about. Being body shamed or having a comment made about that you're the fat kid or the ugly kid is one thing that we need to kind of look at, and how to deal with. But social media can have a big impact too, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in a second. Comments can go around quickly about the person, and it can be solely based about physical appearance, which can be really harsh. But I also want to kind of talk about in the home, sibling bullying, as well as being given a nickname based on your physical appearance, or being, nicknamed something by the family that might seem endearing or loving in context of that person who's given that nickname, but the person experiences it as, something that is not enduring or loving. It is pointing out obviously a flaw and labeling them, and it can be impactful in ways that we don't really intend, but it can have a larger impact, as well as by authority figures. So coaches, teachers, and other activity facilitators making comments about bodies or not giving opportunities for, teens or even earlier kids, I would say preteens, in heavier bodies to kind of be active can have an effect on body appraisals. So we want to make sure that we're kind of looking at all these things, whether it is overt or covert bullying, it still has just the same amount of impact. And we know this, and it's actually been studied in a way where body image can be influenced by media and social media very easily. And I want to touch on one thing particular that we have actually a lot of data on, which can show how easily this can be acted or sort of influenced by, in a very concentrated way very easily. So in Fiji, there was a study that occurred because in the mid 90s, Fiji was the last place on really Earth that didn't have access to Western culture or cable or all those things. So when they got access in the mid 90s, there were some social anthropologists and people in research who wanted to go study like what happens when newly influenced Western and more predominant culture influences are thrown at people, what happens? And they received access to cable in 1995. So they did an immediate study 1 year after and a follow-up 3 years later. And it was really interesting to see the effects, which is in 95, a year later, abouts, resulted after they had this influence or started to watch, TV from the 90s, 3% of them started to engage in compensatory behaviors. And this is like, teenagers, small kids, and 13% scored higher on an eating disorder criteria test than they did on the initial introduction. When they followed up 3 years later, all of those scores were threefold more. And so you can see the effects of this over time. In 1998, part of the longitudinal data study and seeing what are the effects over several years was also to show that 50% were more likely to describe themselves as too big or too fat. And this is solely just by watching TV, cable TV, and having that influence. And 30% were more likely to diet than girls who watch television less frequently. So the ones who were watching it more frequently and consuming on a more intense basis were more likely to diet. And this is just from consuming media. So we know the effects of media and sort of the messages, even if it is covert, can have on young minds. And we know that this is also happening today with our social media, which wasn't back then something that was in existence, but now we're seeing that this can be detrimental in a lot of ways, that even social media companies themselves have found internal research of their own products produce this in preteen females. And I would also argue probably to an extent males, but they didn't focus so much on studying that. In turn, we have to kind of consider that this has a big influence, and a really not so great influence. And part of the struggle with this is even on a provider side or supporting people with these issues and getting the word out, is that these algorithms for Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, everything can change often. So the pattern of how they introduce new stuff to you, and sort of like what they put in the things that you like and things that they throw your way, they change often enough that even the public doesn't know the impact of those things. We don't know when it's going to change or what it's going to change to. So there are some stopgaps to it that we even have harder time. That even when a new trend is noticeable, there are others that maybe not. So some of these things are covert, and I want to give you a little sense of that. And that the body ideal that is related to and not seen, they can be so covert that you don't know that you're getting a message about maintaining a body ideal, or that is about changing a negative body image experience for something that's like unhealthy, but they are related. So here's what I mean about it. So common examples that you may be familiar with is, understanding like thinspo or thinspiration, Anna or Mia in traditional senses. If those are kind of used, it means kind of anorexia and Mia. So we will see things like pro-Ana or pro-Mia sites, things that are commonly saying that they are for weight loss or fitspiration. Those are pretty common, and sometimes you can still see those. Now, social media is flagged for if you look for these things, there will be a warning sign that comes up just because of how prolific they are. However, recently, if we look at things like TikTok or even the use of hashtags, which is basically in a hashtag, if you use the pound sign and sort of a little tiny like blurb or a description afterwards, like you see in these recent examples, this will take you to or tag a certain, post or a media, social media kind of post or a little film, especially on TikTok. About 30 seconds long. And you may not know that some of these are actually eating disordered, but they are. So Ed Sheeran, for example, is there because ED, right? So Ed Sheeran became famous for, doing his music stuff, but then for a little bit on TikTok, he got famous because ED was in there. And so there's all these places kind of promoting Ed Sheeran, but it wasn't about Ed Sheeran, it was about ED. A4 challenge is something that typically was, famous in more Asian countries and got here. So taking an A4 or an 8 by 11 piece of paper and seeing if your stomach could fit within that. If you saw any sides of your abdomen on the side, you did not meet the criteria for the A4 challenge. Ed Talk, what I eat in a day, these are pretty common, but again, what somebody else eats in a day is not necessarily the things that you should, and what are they promoting and are they qualified to do that is some of the things we don't think about. And then there can be something like collarbones, but also changing the O's to zeros so that it doesn't actually get promoted in the same way. So there's a lot of ways people can hide it. And there's a lot of ways that it can easily be influenced or pop up on anybody's social media if we're not paying attention. So I want you to think about those social media influences and how they can easily kind of get in. And you may see some of these too in your, kind of social media as well. But we're going to talk about how you can sort of get that reversed. Eating disorders in athletes, I'm going to go over this kind of briefly because I want to get through a lot more content, but eating disorders in athletes, this is one area that we don't seemingly think is going to be a big influence, but it is. They can be highly influenced based on the certain sport or other things related to that, such as coaching, which I'll go over in a second. It's often not fully noticeable, but it is really, really impactful for people who are having some of those risk factors and then engage in athletic performance. And some of the places where we've seen this be more prolific are in particular sports. So commonly sports that place an emphasis hopefully I'm there. I'm sorry for that, everybody. I think my computer decided to kind of just not cooperate anymore. I digress. So let me get back to sort of Okay, so hopefully I have ability to change the slides. If not, let me see if I can get back the control to kind of take over the slides, and I will keep kind of going. So as they start working on that, I'm going to keep kind of going and flowing with like what I have on the slides. Give me 1 second on those things for a minute. But what I do want to highlight with the last slide is particularly the issue of going into a sport, and particularly the issues with obtaining, kind of like an interest in a sport that is based on weight, body, or aesthetics. These particular sports like wrestling, gymnastics, ballet, as well as some other things outside of sports. Cross country has been a huge one over the past couple of years, that has been kind of getting some traction in there too. And I'm going to pull up the slides again, and there we all are. Okay, so in terms of these sports, why it is so vital to keep track of some of the things that we need to is really more in a sort of effort to understand that they are solely based in the performance on aesthetics. So obviously something like, eating disorders can develop in wrestling because there is an emphasis on making weight. Gymnastics, there's also one. On whatever activity you want to do, such as parallel bars, you might need to be lesser weight. So we need to kind of be able to understand like the sports that we are engaging in, and sometimes the unhealthy weight restrictions or things that are going on can be a detriment to that person. So the other thing that I usually like to highlight is that team coaches or training programs, camps that emphasize extreme competition can be also very dangerous. And what I mean is coaches and trainers that are providing kind of these messages that can be dangerous, are looking at, sort of creating more of a emphasis on competition than really doing the healthy thing. And so again, it's not all coaches and trainers, but we want people to look out for this and really do some education on this to the larger community, that when your kid is in a competition or a sport that, really is emphasizing or engaging in a sport at a really high level, we want you to be aware that there are certain things that might go to the wayside in lieu of getting the win. And that really should not be the way. So only a third of coaches or trainers, and this is kind of what I want you to envision, only a third of coaches and trainers have any nutritional awareness training or education in some form when they go into that, kind of, again, role of coaching and training. And less than 1/2 of those third use information that was empirically supported and evidence-based. There is a way to get this information, but I want you guys to think about, what is the coach or trainer telling my kid to do? Are they saying like, don't drink so much before you perform or go on, that cross country meet, because it's just going to slow you down, you're going to get cramps? Well, then that person's going to be dehydrated. And now they're learning like, oh, whenever I do this sport, I need to be dehydrated because I'm not going to perform as well. Or changing how they eat based on that, or you need to drop a weight. Think about what the coaches and trainers are asking, and if there is any empirical data to support it, is going to be a key thing. So we just want to get that word out. Most of the times as providers, we are often saying like, please just make sure you have the things you need to be an informed parent and make sure your kid stays healthy in those respects. So in terms of observable signs, I do want to highlight a couple of this. This is in the handout, one of the handouts I gave you, which is really things that you can observe about your kid or somebody who you're supporting with, that is developing an eating disorder or, unhealthy body image. Really is some of these things that are happening. So if we see like clothing changes or clothing that's inappropriate for this certain, time of the year, that they're, wearing really heavy winter clothes in the summer to hide their body, that's one of the things we want to kind of think about. again, these will all be kind of listed and actually more in the handout. So observable signs for food intake or based behaviors could be their food, habits change, such as they increase or decrease what they're drinking or only drink specific things. They suddenly adopt a food preference immediately that really limits their intake variety. They use excessive amounts of mouthwash, mints, or gum to avoid or sort of numb out their taste buds and sort of like just mute out. And so all they can experience or taste is literally mouthwash or mints or gum. It also can be a sign that somebody is engaging in purging because they need to kind of get rid of the smell of vomit or self-induced vomiting. Other observable signs in a social and emotional sense could be the fear of eating in public with others. They stop eating at restaurants, going out to family dinners with family. They may also be very sensitive to body changes or them body changes being pointed out by others, and really sensitive or upset when a comment, even what is seemed to be neutral or something that's not intensely on any set of a spectrum, positive or negative, they will get upset. So, other observable signs in terms of like physical or cognitive changes, we do see some of these things. And this is when you see any physical or cognitive changes, this is one of the places where you are going to probably need to seek out professional health and get something, either quantifiably like through lab tests or physical, kind of exams, as well as going to seek out treatment, because this is one of the things that when these two places get to be in a place where it's very observable and can be sort of seen just flat out in front of your face, that this is where there is probably more of a possibility that it is diagnosable as an eating disorder. When to seek this out, again, any physical symptom that is frequent and severe, really I encourage people to go to their pediatrician, but more so to a eating disorder treatment center for an evaluation. For your pediatrician, there is definitely some areas that you want to highlight if there are any labs or physical signs through an EKG or weight that you can document. That is key. Many pediatricians aren't fully versed in being an eating disorder specializing. However, if you go to an eating disorder treatment center and get an evaluation, they do need some of those mental health or physical markers, and your pediatrician can provide lab results and physical exam outcomes to the treatment disorder center that is doing the evaluation, and they can help you sort of actually get a good list or recommendation of list of things if you don't know or the pediatrician doesn't know. If you're noticing any severe engagement, again, the more frequent, the more severe, and how longer it's been going on, those are the clinical markers. And any sort of understanding of rapid decline that you are observing in the health status or academic declines too can be another place because of the cognitive or social difficulties. First and foremost, just go and get the help and look at those signs. And even if it is, the Eating Disorder Treatment Center says that, no, you don't meet enough criteria to be at our center, but going and giving you a referral elsewhere to somebody outpatient that can see them one-on-one like me, that is something that you need to listen to. And if your supported loved one, preteen or teen, says, hey, I think I have an eating disorder, I need help, that is a surefire sign. Don't shut that down. Go seek help immediately and go to an eating disorder treatment center or the resources that I give you in the handout for education and resources for treatment is probably the first thing that you should go to. So when do you seek out that help? There are certain things that we need to kind of understand that the treatment team will have several professionals on it. There will be most commonly a psychotherapist, a registered dietitian, and a primary care physician and or a psychiatrist on the team. There are common modalities that are used in terms of like what things really do speak to helping eating disorders in families that I've listed below too. So looking out for any of those things in the treatment centers or people who you're looking to get help from, that these are some of the common modalities of therapy that are worked on that you can look. So let's go into what you can do now. I know I've given you a lot of information and, kind of left and then came back. It was just to see if you guys were listening too. I'm just kidding. But so what can we do now? And here's where I think is the greatest thing that we can offer is that I'm going to tell you things you can do today to start reversing this. As a parent, as a school, as a provider, there are things that you can do right now, starting today, that can start to change or prevent or help somebody, which is, I think, the most key essential thing in this is that you can do something about this and big things about this. So let's get into it. When I do talk to people about sort of what we can do, it's really setting up this framework of moderation, balance, and variety. And really looking at these three areas is going to be a key thing. So moderation in anything that we do, balance between the things that we are looking at, and a variety. So this can go for movement, this can go for food, this can go for activities that we engage in for social as well as emotional health. If it's in moderation and balance and variety, you're hitting the key spot. So we need to maintain that balance with everything that we're doing. So if I was to give you some tips on how to communicate with your teen on particularly food and body image, I would say first and foremost, be aware of your food and body language, meaning the terms that you use and the biases that you may hold, which is a key thing, is going to be influential in a way that you are not aware of, and they hear this differently than you intend. So even if you're going around the house and saying like, oh, I need to lose some weight, or that I need to go on a diet, these are some of the ways that it really starts to impact. And again, the impact can be very early on. So if a 6-year-old, if a 7-year-old is hearing a parent go in with these negative body image, or I need to diet, or I need to lose weight very early on, then they're going to pick up that message too in the home, not just outside of the home. But also there may be things that you're intending to express differently, such as, you look so much healthier, or you look like you lost weight. We don't want to be commenting on bodies or doing that, because what that person might hear who has an issue with those things could really be taken differently. We all have to always listen before we're talking or inserting. We want to listen to what our kids are saying about this. And you may not have the 100% right thing to say, but you're going to be able to hear them out from their point of view. And I think that's the more key thing. So listen. And if you don't know, or you're going to say something, I always want people to ask for clarification to see if they're hearing it right or getting it right, or if it makes sense to that person, is going to be a key thing. Again, we don't want to praise on physical appearance or looks. We want to praise on other things, such as, again, kind of like how that person is going through their life in different areas, the things that they're accomplishing in other ways, or how proud they're taking a different process to do something and finding confidence. Not all physical appearance or looks is the only way. So again, you look like you lost weight, you look thinner, you look pretty, is not always the thing that we need to be commenting on. And we're not going to punish people for engaging in diet or unhealthy media use. We're going to be open and supportive. Again, social media can be very, very distinct in how it actually creates that issue for people, and not knowingly creates that issue for people, especially preteens and teens. So we don't want to get very angry or punish somebody for engaging in these things if we know that there's influences that may be outside of their control or understanding that they're engaging in. We want to be open and supportive and try to get that teen or preteen out of that. So encouraging healthy coping, what I usually will say at the sort of scale end is, I want everybody to ditch the scale at the home. There's no need to keep a scale. This is one thing you can do today. Throw that thing out. In terms of like the scale and what that means for anybody in the home, is there's only a couple of different areas of why a scale would need to be used and utilized, which is if somebody, a person is actually pregnant and needs to gain weight and needs that recorded. For a kid who is still developing and growing, however, it doesn't need to be done every day. It can be done in the office, and the weight does not need to be sort of spoken to the kid. There's something that we're going to, kind of promote in that. And that we don't really need to be weighed for any other appointment need or anything else, unless there is a life-threatening illness that requires us to record a weight. So anytime you go to the doctor, anytime you take your kid to the doctor, you do not need that weight recorded, or you don't need to actually have a weight taken, and you don't need to see the weight. And so this is something that we've kind of gotten used to as a culture. However, eating disorder experts and medical providers have chimed in on, this is not something that needs to be done. So ditch the scale in the home. You don't need one. There's no need to do it. And there's no need to actually seek it out in every single medical, appointment or visit. And there's ways that we can actually have that done. Adopt the health at every size mentality principles. There is a link on the resources and education handout that will take you to the Association for Size Diversity and Health, which created the health at every size or HAES principles. We want to do that inside and outside of the home. And these are very key principles that kind of diminish or take down that idea of weight stigma or bias. We want to request that weight is not discussed unless necessary in a medical office. Again, there are a link on that on the handout that has a card that you can get for free that you can take the appointments. It says, do not discuss my weight with me, or do not discuss my weight with my child, discuss it with me only. And that can be very key to kind of not focusing on weight. Promoting an all foods fit or food is fuel mentality in the home is key. So there's not good and bad foods. There's not healthy and unhealthy foods. Broccoli has just as much place in your diet as donuts, and donuts are delicious, and broccoli is delicious, and they all fit. They all can meet that moderation, balance, and variety that's going to be key. But when we start omitting things and saying this is a good food, this is bad food, this is healthy, this is unhealthy, we are removing that, as well as promoting joyful movement. Joyful movement is not something to compete or a means to an end. It's just enjoying the movement in the moment, and it can be anything. We want to encourage also savvy media use. You also can do this too. Looking at your own social media use and what messages you're being sent is going to be a key thing. And think about, you can look at that, but also modeling this for your teen and teaching them about, hey, I think this what I eat in the day post is not healthy. Or do you see like they're promoting a diet culture in this, and it doesn't seem to be like in sort of what you think it is kind of mentality. Can be a way to kind of look at like what you're consuming, and thus also teach your kid what they're seeing too, can really change. Making an effort to look at social activities that your teen can enjoy without the pressure to perform or perfect or compete is a key thing. Can we just do something to enjoy the actual process of doing it without any outside pressure to perform, perfect, or compete in this is a key thing. And hold a rule on no commenting on bodies in the home. I think this should be a very, very vital thing for every home. No commenting on any bodies, not mom, not dad, not your sister, not your brother, nobody's bodies. We should not be making comments on bodies. This is something that can help more than you think in a lot of different areas for more than one person too in the home. And have a plan on how to cope with others who may engage in unhealthy commenting and practices. Part of the tips that I give for over the holidays is how to confront these behaviors and support somebody when these comments can come, as well as some of the things in healthy coping skills, and remembering those holidays are more than just food-based things. They're actually celebrations of something completely different, like connecting with families and friends or gratitude, and coming back to that emphasis, as well as having conversations with those people who are unhealthy about, hey, we're not engaging in this. So again, some more actionable steps that I want you to kind of think is make efforts to eating meals together as much as possible is a key thing. I know Operation Parent also pushes this as well. I push this. This is something that I really want to get across, is that it doesn't have to be perfect too. Wherever you can start with this is a key thing. So meaning like if it's just starting with breakfast, having breakfast a couple of times a week with everybody and sitting down for a meal, it can model good behaviors. It can also be a thing to connect again. And if it just starts in one place and grows, it's better than not having it at all. So making efforts to try to find to eat meals or eat together as much as possible is a key part that you can start doing today. Promoting kind of balanced eating habits. So if we're going to have that moderation, balance, and variety in what we eat, we're going to promote it in the field, and we're going to promote it in the food that we eat too. We're going to focus on promoting self-compassion and the praise of the process, not the accomplishment for people. So this means we're going to promote like the process of accomplishing in a way where we're going to embrace failure if it happens, but not in the outcome that the only way we get accomplished or praised is through what we produce, not the process of going through it. We're going to have running discussions about social media, television, and films. We're going to make sure that your medical providers are HAES affirming, which you can get off of the site and see who in your local, community is adopting these principles, and learn about it ourselves and give them that information if we need to. So please go to the Association for Size Diversity and Health. We're going to advocate for our kids' well-being at school, as well as kind of practices that the school might be engaging in that we need to kind of let them know is not something that we would condone, such as calorie trackers in PE or health classes, or any practices that promote arbitrary weight biases. And think about it, even just coming to this, you took a positive step. You're learning about ways that you can start today to kind of instill hope for yourself in these situations. On the community-based level, what schools can do is do the same things. Promoting a Hays mentality, as well as physical education and sports activities, should be maintaining a balanced approach. There should be some evidence behind maintaining an energy balance or other things that we're promoting as nutritional or physical needs in these sports. Health classes, we need to be able to highlight Hays principles and reducing promoting biased messages, like things like everything out of a box or a bag, it is bad. Use of dieting apps or calorie trackers, noting and showing biased documentaries about, kind of things that open us up to more bias. Um, Teachers, what I would say is look out for those behavioral signs as well, especially the mental, physical, and academic ones on cognitive and physical things that we can notice very easily in the classroom. We want to be aware of bullying, particularly weight biased or body-based bullying in the classroom and its effects on us students, and be able to stop that as soon as we start to see it. Refrain from promoting messages about the body, food, and health that are rule-based or biased without any support evidence that we have to back it up or that is shown in actual to support a healthy lifestyle. So at the end, the take homes that I want you to think about is that these can be very impactful disorders, but they start a lot earlier. They start with, questioning body and sort of, teasing and sort of body ideals that we get adopted that we can stop if we just don't promote those messages. Preteens and teens are also highly susceptible to developing challenging relationships in food and body, but we see the signs earlier, right? We want to help and support that is available, and there are free resources, which is awesome. There's a lot of data and a lot of free resources on that handout, because as an eating disorder treating community, we've known that access to care for these disorders has been very hard over the years to supply to patients because of just the bias and other things, and really trying to get the word out that these are not only physical disorders, but they are mental health disorders. So there is a big emphasis in our community to provide free and accessible support and care in a lot of different ways with the resources that you have listed on that handout. And we can change things for a better when we are a part of the different ways to engage in our own body and food in order to positively influence us around her. I put this in here because if we just say, hey, I don't want you to take my kid's weight, or we ditch the scale, or we kind of take into effect those Hays principles and we start being vocal about it in our community, we can stop it. We stop engaging with social media. We are the people who can change this, not some government entity. We can do that stuff right now in our communities if we say, no, we do not want this. And that's the thing that I want you to kind of think about, is all those educational resources that I'm giving you, things are things that you can start enacting today in your community and with the people who you love to stop this from proliferating further. If we stop consuming the stuff and stop giving into these messages, we can have it stop in our communities and influence in a different way. So I think that puts it really right in your hands that you can start this today, which is a great feeling that you can have a big effect on the people who are proliferating this and saying no more, and also influence things happening better for your kids. So I would say, if you have any questions about this or other things that you want to sort of talk about in this and sort of go over, please, now I think is about the time. And I know there's some other things to kind of go over, but in these resources, as well as the handouts, as well as other things in the Operation Parent workbook, there is a lot of good stuff in there, particularly with, again, some of the things on bullying that has gone over in some of the pages, as well as, promoting healthy eating, that we kind of flesh out a bit more in this discussion today. So yeah.
Dr. Terada, thank you so much for this amazing information. You had me thinking about a recent trip to the doctor with my daughter for strep throat. And she was weighed at that appointment, and she was feeling terrible. She didn't want to be weighed at all because she wanted to just lay down on the exam table. She was feeling terrible. It would have been a good opportunity following that to just say, when she felt better, hey, that appointment didn't really, your weight there was not
There's no need.
necessary, to be examined for strep.
Yeah.
But just for her to, be thinking about that bigger picture, like it, it doesn't mean anything connected to the strep,
Hmm.
just,
And
and
anybody can say at any time during an appointment, no, there's no need. You don't need to weigh me. I don't want to know that number.
yeah, and that card that you guided us to, can you remind everybody where they can pick that up again? Because that's really neat tool to have if you're concerned about eating disorder issues or you're tending in that direction. You can just hand the card to the
You
medical
can.
staff, and it just basically says, "Please don't weigh."
Yes. And so you can get this. It's one of the resources on the handout. There is a couple different places where you can get actually some really good sort of advice, especially on the haze. There's one particular place that you can go for these cards. I have it listed on there, and the name's escaping me because I don't have the handout in front of me. But it will say like the Weigh No More cards. And there's one for individuals, adults, and everybody else. And there's one for particularly parents with kids. And the card says on it, like, you do not need to take my weight. I wish not to know it. Or if you do need to take my weight for my child, because again, for developmental reasons, we might need that. Please talk to me only about my child's weight. Do not discuss it with my child. And that can be very helpful. They are for free, and even providers can go and get a whole box of them or so many for free. I believe it's like 25 or pay for more. And I give these out to everybody who has a body image issue or struggling, or a parent, to get into sort of that mindset of like there's not really a need on a strep throat appointment or even a vaccination appointment, or a, very much, kind of understanding that like if it's something that you're going in for, a specific need, you don't need it for kids. They may need on a physical health exam, but they don't need to hear that number or have that emphasized. It's changing the discussion in the medical appointment, which is a key thing,
Yeah,
and making
great
sure that you're
advice.
advocating is a
Yes,
key thing as well.
yes, great tools and great way to expand our thinking as parents too.
Hmm.
Um,
Definitely.
so one of our guests has a 15-year-old daughter, and she's 90 pounds at this point, restricting eating, and appears to be very particular about counting calories, and often skips lunch. But as the mom is working with the teen to talk about it, the teen is not seeing any issues with it or
Yeah.
not willing to talk about it yet. Could you provide some strategies for opening
So
up the dialogue?
the first strategy I would say is look into getting probably some resources on getting to eating disorder treatment. That idea that, like, again, what I'm doing is not really affecting my health or has a big impact, when people are engaging in more restricting behaviors, is something that we commonly do see. So it's not unusual to hear, a teen saying like, no, it's not having that big of an issue, or blah blah blah. And this is something that, an eating disorder specializing treatment team encounters a lot of times at the beginning of treatment for kids and adolescents. Is, they don't think that that's going to be, something that is needed. Like, they don't have an eating disorder. What they got, what they're doing, they're going to be fine.
Mhm.
However, you see, that again, there is a undue influence by weight or body shape or other things that is really not allowing them to see or have insight into how dangerous their behavior is getting. So I would say for that mom, you can take over, the conversation in a way where it's like, we're getting concerned about your continued engagement in this and the impacts of your health. So that may mean that we need to kind of look at or talk about, seeing about getting you some further support beyond what we can provide at home. And she can be a part of that process. She can go and engage in those, eating disorder assessments and go to the doctor. And usually what I tell parents to do is just to be, a person who's kind of an open book, and that those professionals will, again, over time, if you have 5 different really learned, very specialized people saying like, this is an issue, and you as a parent haven't been able to get through, there might just need to be a voice in numbers being able to tell that kid like, you need help, and this is what we specialize in. That can be kind of overriding sort of your ability to provide support. I would say this is somebody who I would definitely get to treatment, because there's physical signs like, I alluded before, as well as, diminished ability to kind of understand that. This is somebody who needs to get to an eating disorder treatment sooner than later before they do really bad damage.
Is there anything about like that particular age group? I know you treat clients of all different ages,
Mhm.
all varying ages and um, levels of struggle, but is there something about, as you're rising towards your upper years in high school, you're starting to probably think about driving and that could be stressful. Is there anything about that age that you notice to be a trend?
Usually, usually we do see in the average median age for boys versus girls. For boys in developing an eating disorder or having a full-blown eating disorder, it's about 14.6 years. For girls, it's a lot younger, about 12.4 years. Doesn't mean that, like, again, those signs and symptoms or sort of a thinness ideal or a need to have a perfect body or shape hasn't started before that. Usually when we see kids about 16, 17, they want more independence. That's kind of a normal part in development. However, a lot of the things that we do see, even at that sort of earlier age, we start to see there's a tremendous pressure, especially in high school, to conform or feel like you're, involved or liked. And that only gets kind of worse as we kind of get older in some ways, especially the pressures of going to college and going on your own and how are you going to be liked? And, there's a lot more people can also sort of influencing that too. But usually around kind of the age where that starts or the median age that we see, it takes sometimes for people to get to that, really intense age where it's starting to be noticeable. And sometimes around 15 or 16 is that pocket that we start to see that. Now, whether it is that particular age group and because of the, things outside or sort of pressures, don't know. It could also be a factor of like people have been engaging in this and it gets prolifically worse over time can also be another thing. So there could be a lot of different factors that are impacting around that
For
age.
sure. And I appreciate what you're teaching us about starting to talk much earlier than what we think we need to
Yes.
is really important. It's just earlier and earlier. And you think about, I was just with some friends this past weekend and their 8-year-olds are asking for phones. So we're
Yeah.
giving, teens phones, teens and younger children phones earlier and earlier so they're exposed to a lot of the things that you were talking to us
Mhm.
about today as
And
well.
I can even say about 10 years ago, this was kind of unheard of to have kids at that age starting to talk about these things. So I think there is definitely a new surgence in the past decade of just how prolific and instant some of these things are with easier access to information and a lot quicker that is
Mhm.
creating impact sooner.
For
Um,
sure.
so
Another guest gave an example. Her 7-year-old is learning about calories at school.
yes,
And so now she's
this is a
starting
big thing.
to, when she gets her snack, she's checking the
Looking at
calorie counts on the snacks. So what advice would you have for that parent?
I would say one, we kind of need to one say that calories are just one unit of the measure of a food item, that it's not the only thing that we need to focus on. I would also maybe get in touch with the health teacher or talk about like how this is being presented. A lot of times we kind of get information back from schools that they're going off of various things that are promoted by kind of national campaigns to get more health into the classroom. But what we focus on is kind of a big thing. Um, Making an effort to say that calories are not the only thing in a food that we need to concentrate on is a big issue, and calorie counts are everywhere too, so it's very easily and prolifically kind of promoted as something that this is the only thing that is in the food that I need to pay attention to. And what we need to kind of get away from is that the calories do not dictate whether this is a healthy or unhealthy food, that it's not a good or a bad food. And there's other things to go in there. If you want to go on your own and sort of, again, you've made those efforts to try to know what is being taught. One, I would say if there's any calorie trackers or things like that, we need to ditch that and, really make
Mhm.
a point with our kids to not track those things. That if we want to have a better basis is going to the American Dietetic Association site, so eatright.org, and look at the information for kids and how to sort of like help them understand what is a good, balanced diet and has variety. But also demonstrate, like, even if it has these calories, does it taste good? Do you want it? Do you feel like, you have a craving for this food, and that's okay. Is getting kids to understand how their body reacts and how to balance their relationship with food is more the key thing that we want to promote with kids than saying, like, because it has too many calories, then I'm not going to eat it, or these are bad calories, or I need to track all calories or be aware of calories. Because there's a certain portion of the population that can do that, but there's others that become really risky and have some of those predisposition factors that put them at risk. And that's not what we want to do.
That makes sense.
So,
Over focus on the calories or
right,
get
there's
too.
also things called protein and carbs and sugars and other things in
Mhm.
there that we can track, and it's only one
Yeah.
marker.
If we wanted to go really deeply, I feel like they should put up there, like, what oil did you cook it in? You
Right.
know, like, is that healthy or unhealthy? Um, so give us some tips on how we counteract all the bad or the abundance of body talk on social media. What are some things, like if you're sitting on the couch, maybe some shows that they're currently watching that would help us get in there
I
and
would
talk,
I
or
would say any shows that promote a certain kind of like talk around body aesthetic or image, or seem to promote, kind of these, more body appearance or ideals in a way that just does not seem to promote all bodies fit, and really letting go of a weight stigma, are something that you should be questioning. If you go to NEDA, or the Association for Size Diversity of Health, there is a lot of resources on how to negotiate, social media use and savvy. But it really is also teaching your kids, like, what do you think they're trying to tell you in this message? What do you kind of get that, like, if I eat this way, then I'm going to be happier? And really, no. All foods fit. So it's also looking and kind of being a savvy consumer yourself on some of these things, and starting to question it in a way that you're looking at what is the message behind this, instead of, oh, I'm just going with it and sort of like automatically consuming it, and not really seeing that there is a message or something that's being sold behind it, and kind of teaching that to your kids. If they really get stuck on a certain social media influencer or user, looking that up and looking that person and kind of looking through their videos and seeing, like, what is that about? And also look at your own social media and start to question that, like, am I consuming, like, messages that I might be handing off to other people, or, speaking in a way that's influencing that in a way that might be unhealthy or taken in a certain way, and starting there, is really going to be probably the best thing. There is also a resource on the list for the body positive, which is a huge kind of resource that's been around for about over 25 years, that really can promote body positive messages. And going on there and looking at some of their resources, they have a really good TED Talk that kind of talks about body positivity, as well as some podcasts that you can start listening to on sort of like what is promoting body positive ideals, and flexibility and understanding that all bodies fit and they're beautiful, and starting to promote that at home too is a key thing.
I think that's a really good idea to just punch in some things on our own social media accounts
Yeah.
and then
Understanding
watch
your own
how.
influences and biases, I think, is a huge thing as a parent
Yeah,
too.
I mean, even if you just lightly look at, like, dieting, or like you mentioned earlier, what you eat in a day, or your feed will just fill so quickly. And so that's,
Hmm.
what your teen is experiencing
Yeah.
too. Okay, so how do you feel about intermittent fasting?
Rather than go on a soapbox, here's what I would say. One, we already have a period of intermittent fasting. We do it all. It's called sleeping. Some of the diets or fasting, protocols that are out there, really, I think if you are attempting to change your lifestyle, it's not just about food consumption. There are several things that go into that. Creating, a way that you can balance out your food. Usually when diets are evolved, one of the things that I want people to kind of understand about this, and that any dietitian would kind of like look at too, is If it omits your ability to have all foods and all foods fitting, and that food is fuel, intermittent fasting is creating a deficit by limiting your access to food and your fuel for more hours than you need a day, and could put you in a place where it's not necessarily the greatest sort of thing if your body can't take it, or if you need certain nutrients, which again, think about kind of what's being promoted in the fasting, and then consuming a really intense amount of calories in a shortened period of time. And some of those protocols are really more akin to dieting culture than anything else. If you do have, movement imbalance, your nutrition imbalance, and other things about kind of your body appraisal and need, that when we look at health at every size, those principles look at, like, if your labs for your health status are in order, if your overall health is free from complications from chronic issues, or you don't have any chronic medical issues, and overall you feel like your body is working and has medically been cleared to be at a place of health, whole body health, wherever your weight is, it doesn't matter as long as you're maintaining whole body health. So I would say something like intermittent fasting or keto or paleo, a lot of those things can have actually permanent damage to your body, especially keto if you do it for a long time. It can actually cause things like non-alcoholic fatty liver and other things if you do it too long, or cholesterol issues and things like that. We just need to get rid of. So yeah, I have a pretty biased opinion about intermittent
Yeah,
fasting or any other diet. Just
yeah.
don't do it.
I could tell from your initial reaction that
Yeah, most of us are
you
going
were
to get
not
on
a
a
big
soapbox on
fan. Yes.
it. So.
But it's a great question, and we hear about that all the time, and there are a lot of people that are doing that. So it's
Think
great to
about how often
know.
that's talked on social media too.
Often, a
Mhm.
lot. Another great question, and you've addressed this all throughout your presentation, but given us a little power punch at the end, so it sticks with us.
Mhm.
How do we approach a conversation with a physician who's discussing BMI concerns with adolescents who are not appearing to be overweight, and the conversation is impacting the adolescent's personal
Yes.
body image?
You can bring a lot of information from the Association of Size, Diversity, and Health with you. If they really have a hard time with that, I would say you are always in a position, if you really feel like that physician is not willing to work with you or hear what you have to say, go find a physician that will. There are physicians and practitioners that are, really in alignment with Hayes mentality and looking at the whole body health. And again, like I alluded to in the presentation, there is Hayes affirming practitioners out there that understand that there is a need to not have an implicit bias, which is a huge thing that is being really touted in sort of healthcare providers feels, is that weight is not the only indicator of whole health. And to look at BMI, again, one of the only things that we would look at for, kind of determining whether somebody's in a healthy state with weight or BMI would be if they're a growing kid, and their BMI is out of whack for where it needs to be, or suddenly changes, a pregnant individual who needs that weight, or some illness or disease process that is going, that we do need to monitor it for health, including eating disorders. So if somebody has a legit diagnosed eating disorder, they may have to go through weighing, but they do not need to know the weight. We usually do not tell them the weight. We just tell them if they've gained or if they restored or they maintained, because of the emphasis on those things and the bias. So I would say if you come across a healthcare provider that you say, I don't want weight to be discussed, or you discuss it with me, or if they want the person to go on a diet and you're like, no, I don't think that's the case, or you're having a feeling like they're not listening to you, go educate them. And if they don't want to listen to that education, go find somebody who's going to align with kind of your health concerns and be in alignment with your advocacy for your kid or yourself.
Yeah, keep
They're going to
going.
harp on this, they're going to harp on other things. And
Don't
not
stop, because their health is so important, so worth it, and you've taught us how serious this can become, like,
Mhm.
so quickly.
Yeah.
So one of our guests also would like to know if you're doing any additional upcoming webinars, or if you know of some down the
Oh,
pike.
um, I'm always free to do other webinars. I do them all the time. I educate in the community. This is something that, I feel is part of my, profession, to be able to offer to you. There are definitely, opportunities to do more. And I could talk with Operation Parent too if you want. You can promote me
Yeah,
too. Um,
check. We'd love to. I think this parent was also curious if there was like, if you knew of any coming up like quickly, like they wanted to do sort of some continuing education.
So if you look at the continuing education on the resource and education list, on NETA, you can go and educate yourself. There are sometimes videos as well as webinars, but they have a really good resource on there called the toolkits. All you have to do is go on there, search toolkits, and they have for free toolkits in several languages for parents on how to promote, how to, sort of understand the signs as well as the steps that you would need if your kid goes into treatment, or even just promoting better body image, kind of like Operation Parent does, but just solely based in these areas. I would start printing those out and looking at that for your education. If you go on the FEAST website, Families Empowering and Supporting Treatment of Eating Disorders, they always have a lot of resources in anything that they produce. They usually will have live support groups as well as peer support and family support, that you can always be a part of and get more information as you go. As far as, kind of other things that you can tap into, NETA always has a conference every year that families and friends and people who are in recovery can go to, as well as ANAD, which is another resource on there that have family support as well as peer support groups that go on every week and all across the country. So there is a lot of other places that you can get, some more education, formal education, as well as just talking to other families that are going through it, because we know that these processes are so difficult to get help for. Just historically over the years, I've been treating these disorders since 2006-ish. And I remember there was times where parents had to take out second mortgages or third mortgages on home just to get treatment for their kids. And now that's not the case, which is so great, because as a community of professional helpers, we've developed all these different things for free care, for access, free support, other things that you can tap into. So
That's amazing. That's
any of
amazing to
the
know. And I'm also glad you mentioned, and I was pleasantly surprised looking through all the resources that you were guiding us to, of the languages that things are available.
yes.
So there's all kinds of language opportunities and resources. Amanda Flaherty has done an amazing job on the back end tech things today. She also just dropped a list of resources in the chat. So if anybody wanted to take some time to just copy those, you've got it all on the handouts already.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah, the
we
Don't
made
Wait Me
it.
cards, other things, yeah.
Yeah, we made a great list here for folks just to take a quick look at here in the chat too. All
And
right.
also, you can still contact me even after this if you want more kind of resources or having troubles kind of accessing some of these things, or if you need specific resources for care and help. I'm always willing to kind of help and answer questions even beyond these things.
Yeah, I know we would love to stay in touch as we hear more from families and in terms of specifically what they're gravitating towards and what their challenges are. Um, Well, we'll keep an eye to see if there's any other questions that pop in the chat. I did want to let folks know a couple of things about Operation Parent as we're wrapping up today. But before I get to that, just thank you so much for all your time that you placed into this webinar, Dr. Terada, and what you've taught us today. We just wanted to let folks know, if you already have an Operation Parent handbook, we'd love for you to flip it back open, take it off the shelf, and look in the elementary handbook on the healthy living information. And then also, if you have the middle and high book, there's a specific chapter there on eating disorders. So if you've got that, pick it back up, reread it. It's not a bad idea to share that information with a friend too. So we're all in this together. So sharing information is great as well. We also want to let you know about a couple of our offers that we have today for those of you that are here with us online. We have individual handbooks. You may purchase one, buy one, get one free. The coupon code for that is individual one. We know, and we've been told over and over again, that our handbooks are saving lives. We have actual examples of where a teen has come to a parent concerned about a friend. Parent was able to flip open the handbook, take a look at the chapters and the information on mental health and realize that it was at a time to go get help. And so our handbooks are chock full with information. They're updated often. They do save lives. So we're hoping that you will purchase one for yourself. Also think about this time of year. It's a great gift for a family, a friend, to gift it to the school so that the school might be aware of this resource. But now's a great time to take a look at it, because you can buy one, get one free if you use the code individual1 at checkout. Just go to Operation Parent /shop. And then if you're an organization, you can use a bulk offer and 20% off of 50 or more. So that's a really great deal here at the end of the year. That coupon code is 20winter. I did want to also let you know we offer free shipping. And so we are so committed to getting information out to families and parents that shipping is free, and these webinars are also offered free. So we're hoping that you'll continue to hang with us and learn more with us and check out our handbooks. Another special opportunity for our folks on the webinar with us today is that we've extended the offer. We usually do just a really quick close on the offer, but you've been with us all year. Many of you have attended all of our webinars, and so we're going to keep that offer open until December 31st, but we'd love for you to take advantage as you can, especially if you'd like the idea of getting them as a gift for a family or friend. All right, let's see. I want to double check the question queue here one last time. We have lots of thank yous.
Oh, welcome.
Okay, thank you so much. And someone has asked if the webinar will be available following our close here, and yes, you will receive the recording even if you were with us live today. The recording is coming to you tomorrow. If you happen to be watching this later, you can still get access to the handouts as well. But that looks like we have gotten through most of the questions. I think all of the questions that I can see, and we've had a great afternoon with you. So we will close here and thank everybody for joining us, and we'll be in touch.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Take care, everyone. We'll see you at the next one.